Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, September 28th meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's June 16th, 2021 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20. The Finance Committee will be using remote participation. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. This time I will take a roll call of attendance. Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
And I am here, and we are now officially called to order. Okay. So let me pull up our agenda. We have administrative stuff. The only thing I wanted to comment on was I have now gotten 3 sets of minutes from Lisa that I'm working on with her to get them polished up and ready for presentation. I will almost certainly have those by next week because they're almost there. It's really been held up more by me than by her because I've been dealing with college calculus for the last couple of weeks for one of my daughters. So in any case, I will have those for next week. Other than that, there is nothing that I know of on the administrative side, unless there's anything like reserve fund transfers that you know about, Travis. Okay, so we'll move right on to the update from the town administrator. So take it away, Travis.
All right, so if I'm reading the agenda, the majority of things that are related to town meeting, we're going to wait.
Yeah, regarding the warrant, we can wait until number 4. Yeah.
Okay, so I did show, I'm still trying to get the presentation. It was covered in the Holliston Reporter from Stantec last night on the water. Get that updated. They mentioned, they're putting finishing touches on the not the presentation, excuse me, the actual document itself is not ready. They gave a presentation. They showed the tool last night. Some of that was highlighted. Once I have the presentation, that'll be going on the website, as were some other things, but we'll cover that in further detail with the Warrant articles. The other 2 things, for the most part, Jay was there. I believe he's updating the Finance Committee. So Kathleen Buckley is going to be the ATA HR director, and her start date officially is November 1st. So that's also our deadline internally to get the HR office set up. So James Keese is working on that. Otherwise, since the last time we spoke, mostly I've been working on the warrant. So the only other thing I would mention is that next Monday night, 10/4, we will have, I believe we scheduled Ken to come and discuss financial policies based on the vote that you all took, I think a week ago at this point, 2 weeks ago potentially. But obviously we've been working on the warrant. So 10/4 Monday night, that is on our agenda, and we'll lead off the top of that. We'll lead off the top of the agenda to get Ken in and out at his request. That's all I have for other than warrant.
So on the financial policies, actually, Ben just showed up. Give him is that a question for him?
Okay. There he is.
What's my question?
Dying down.
Good evening, Mr. Sherrill. The financial policies, I know that we had talked a bunch and you were sort of willing to just sort of give your sort of thoughts on some of the things and what might be available to you personally as one member of the select board.
Sure. I mean, I can speak to a few things. I will say I have to leave at 7:15. I have a Envisioning Future Holliston meeting that'll take about 10 minutes, but that I have to go to. But sure. So with respect to the financial policies, so there's a few things. I mean, so the first off, my ideal situation would be to continue to have the policies that were approved by the select board. That's what I would want in an ideal world. I understand that, we've got, we have several groups that need to oversee these things and look at them and provide input. So I respect that. That being said, a couple things. Now, I don't think I actually have the actual draft, so can't really speak to exactly the language that's in there. that was approved by the finance committee. Maybe I must have missed it. It must be in my.
Well, I think Travis, I did send that to Travis, right? You do have it, right, Travis? I sent it to you after the meeting, I believe.
Yep, I'll make sure everybody has that before our
He
conversation.
probably sent it to me. He's good about sending.
No,
that
that's
stuff.
fine. I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't waiting for me, that's all.
So in any event, a couple things. The big thing that everybody's talking about is OPEB. And I would prefer to see 1.25 million to OPEB, 250 to pension stabilization in the budget, in the omnibus budget. But based on where you guys are, I would say, I would probably be willing to say, okay, to 1.5 million out of omnibus, because that's what we've been doing. And then 250 out of free cash in the fall. That presents a couple things in my mind. First, because it's sort of another hungry mouth to feed, as Travis put it. I think that's the right way to think about it. That I think we need to put some additional guardrails on free cash in that respect, because we want to make sure that things aren't, we're managing all of our priorities in general. And I think part of what free cash has been used for is for things like projects and one-time expenses. So what I would prefer is to have some language in the free cash part, if we're going to use free cash for pension, that says something to the effect of, we'll put 250 towards pension stabilization. We'll put money towards general stabilization until it reaches target. And once it's at target, we'll stop. And then the rest of the money can be used towards specific projects, such as warrant articles, capital projects, and things like that. And anything else that's sort of left over should be left as free cash until the spring, and then can be used and allocated accordingly. And that's kind of where I'm at. That being said, the other piece of that, I'd be okay with the 1.5 million, but I'm not okay with 2033. I feel 2033 as a target date is too aggressive. It's based on a number of assumptions that I think are too long range to be effective. For example, the discount rate would be 7% and a healthcare increase of 4.5%. And I feel that's just, it's, might work short term, but I think over 12, 15, 20 years, I don't think that's the right way to do it. So I would want 2033 removed. I would want the language that was there before that said funded by 2040 to remain. And
so your concern is if we set 2033, that there could be pressure in the future if the inputs, but through no fault of our own, change, that there would be pressure to potentially increase the 1.5.
I think that's part of it. Yeah, I feel 2033 is not the right number. I think 2040 is more realistic. I think it should be linked up with pension. I think there needs to be a little bit more. I think there needs to be a different process there. I don't think 2033 is the right number personally.
2033 is the number that it has been basically since it's at the 1.5.
So it might have been that way based on what the reports were saying, based on the assumptions.
Yeah.
But I just don't think it's realistic. I think it's because there's too far out. There's too many assumptions, and the assumptions can change. If we get a spike in healthcare costs, if we get as we get additional retirees, whatever. There's a lot of factors that can play into that, and I feel that's too aggressive. That's just my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of the select board that I'm speaking about right now.
Hey, Ben, you wanted to say something?
I do. I think everything you've just said makes it even more of a reason to keep putting the money in. You're saying, what happens if we have more retirees? What happens if the health?
I didn't say take the money out, Ben.
Right, Ben. He's amenable to the 1.5.
No, but I said leave 1.5 million, and that's it. And that's all I'm saying.
But that 1.5 is based also on the target date of 2033. So. I
don't think that should. I think if we're funded by 2033, I think that's fine.
Okay, so
But I
really,
don't think that should be at the target. I just think that's too aggressive.
Well, I personally have said from the beginning, what I'd like to see is just have it maintain the 1.5, right?
And that has always, by chance, that has remained, and we've talked about it as 2033. So they've always kind of been in line. So they've been sort of.
Right. I wouldn't be in favor of raising the 1.5 million to do that. So that I agree in that respect, right? I don't think that we want to say to hit a target we're going to raise it, but I do think that keeping it at 1.5 million is fine, right? And especially since we revisit every 2 years anyway.
Right. So while Ben has only one vote, obviously, it seems like that what we were proposing was certainly not going to be amenable to anyone on the select board. And since really 1.5, has been the number that we don't want to move from, and the reason why I thought 2033 was still okay was that if it happened to move in, then we could, in theory, potentially reduce it. I still think that the keeping the 1.5 is probably the priority.
The goal should be to keep the 1.5 regardless of where it puts us.
Right. So, I think, I don't know if we want to revote what our thing is or just simply tell the chair from in his discussions with the select board next week, take sort of a straw poll and see, if we.
oh, yeah, I would suggest we figure out what and then we have reconciliation committee. Like they do in
Right.
Congress.
Yeah, I would recommend, what I would suggest is, I'm just gave you my personal opinion. I would say, don't vote on anything, don't change anything, and just come in. This is your position. This is where you're coming from. And I just would recommend that if that's what you want to propose, that you just, why do you want it that way? Why is it, why do you want it to be 1.5 million? If you want to keep it 2033, if that's negotiable, certainly make that a point. But if you want it to be 2033, if that's the consensus of this group, why 2033? You go through those steps, and because I think we've approved a set of policies that the select board is comfortable with, and that's I think why change it? Why should we change it? Why should we change our positions on that? I'm telling you where I'm.
This is just because you acted first doesn't mean that's like you saw them first, you acted first. I mean that just that this is a joint document. It was actually a document that was the genesis and the germination of it was from the finance committee, actually, that we then invited the select board.
It doesn't become town policy until my board approves it.
Well, true, but it's a financial policy, so that it can be.
You can have a financial FinCom policies, but it's not town policy until the select board approves it.
No, I understand, but nor the finance committee.
Okay. Anyway, let's not go down.
I have to jump off. So I thank you for letting me speak, and I'll be back in probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. We'll be done by then. No, just kidding. Yeah. Okay, Michelle.
When we discussed this last time, the reason that I was so entrenched in the 2033 was because that's what we promised the town meeting when this was enacted. And that's.
Okay, Jay, I know what you're going to say. It was never promised the town meeting, so I can save you the trouble if that's what you want to do.
But if
do I get to speak, Ken, or are you going to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait,
I just saw your hand go up. I knew what you were going to say.
All right, but if it came down to we can't have a financial policy because the two boards can't agree on something, to me, ensuring that $1.5 million is put aside every single year is more important to me than sticking to 2033. Right,
and that's what I've said, right? That's why I don't want to necessarily go down there, because I don't think the issue is 2033 or nothing. It's the 1.5 million is my bigger thing. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so Michelle, if you look at your reports, it's not 2033. So that's the short of it. I can send you screenshots of every report, because the FinCom reports in 13 and 14, the math comes out to, we promised the town, we said to the town we were targeting 2037. And then after that, the financial committee reports say by or at the latest 2040.
Well, the 2014 report says 2033, which is the first year that the thing.
I'll send you the screenshots. Like
I have the reports, Jake, but
Hold on,
Okay,
stop.
let's,
I'm talking
okay,
about-
everybody calm down, one at a time.
I'm talking about when this was instituted, when we went to town meeting the first time, that was the promise we made. Subsequent, I'm not talking about subsequent, I'm talking about when this was sold to town meeting.
but every report that you filed, that the finance committee filed after that, for 2 years, the math was 2037, and after that, it was 2040. So you might have said one thing in one meeting, and then for 7 other reports that you filed with the town, you said something different. So to say we made a promise.
I think you're confusing the policy with the by 2040, which is sort of the statutory sort of end date. When
I'm telling you, Dan, what's in the report. I'll send you the screenshots, the screenshots.
And the only reason, and again, I'm not trying to cut you off, Jake, but the only reason I don't want to go down this rat's nest again is because the issue at hand is not, we've already said, what I'm looking for and what Ben was looking for was the 1.5 million is fine. You know, if we continue the 1.5 million, I don't think any of us would be so married to the date. So that's why I don't want to go down that path. It's irrelevant at this point.
I just want to clarify, like, it was a big deal. We made a promise, and I'm just articulating what you actually put in your document.
Yeah.
Now, going to your train of thought, Ken, where I'm stuck is, you know, the 1.5, if it gets us to like 2033 or 2034, what I think what I'm looking at is like, we have to get that paid off or are self-funded no later than 2040. But and right now, 2 years, the latest 2 schedules have us getting to, I think it's 2033 was the 2020 schedule, said it was self-funded by 2033. And the 18 schedule said 2034. What's like locking us into those dates? Because that's like a 6 or 7 year difference. And we're putting $1.5 million in, right? And it goes back to the opportunity cost. So help me with the date timing. Go ahead.
I'll help you with this. Everybody's got to stop thinking that the 1.5 million came out of the budget. It did not. Okay. This was specifically the result of savings that were implemented at the time, and what the commitment was at the time that we were going to use that money to get rid of this liability. And that's why I said I'm not fixated on the date. So I can understand your point, Jay. If you said we went through the pain of withdrawing all this money from the budget, and so there's a benefit to putting it back in the budget. This was money that was never there, and it was specifically withheld from being put in the budget because the liability was large. The liability is changing, and I'll point out that even though this funding schedule says 2033, 2034 in the last report, it also points out that our liability went up over the last 2 years. Okay, so it's not, and Travis has pointed this out before, that the numbers are all over the place, right? So it may say 2034 now, but that was before COVID. Now COVID may bring it down more because people are dying, right, or it may have the exact opposite effect because we had to hire a whole bunch more people, right? So the liability may have grown a lot in the last couple of years. We don't know.
Insurance costs go up.
So, but from my perspective, just my personal perspective is the money was set aside for a purpose and should be around until that purpose is fulfilled. Then you can say, what do we do with the next? Maybe we divert all to pension and say, okay, now we go $1.5 million pension till that's done. And I don't need to reopen the policy discussion, but that's why I said, I think that it's really the wrong way to think about it, to say, you know, it's just dying to go back into the budget. It was never in the budget in the first place for a reason, and it was set aside for a purpose, which was to pay off this liability. So that to me is why I said I don't care about the year. If we get there in 2025, fantastic. Then we can talk about moving it to pension or doing something else with it. But I don't like the idea of saying, well, you know, it's like, as I said, it's like taking a mortgage and saying, okay, I have a 30-year mortgage, and hey, look, I noticed that after 25 years, my principal balance is really low. So let me just keep refinancing and pushing that date out so that I have more cash. It's like, that's not what we want to do. Finish the obligation. You put it aside to finish the thing. If it takes 2037, 20, whatever, then do that. Now, if your investment returns are phenomenal and you're really close and you sit there and say, then we can have that discussion, but we're not there yet. And so that's why I said it's a 2-year revisit. If 2 years from now we look at the situation, it's different, then we may have a different conversation. If 2 years from now the number's pushed out to 2040, then we're going to want to keep 1.5 million. The problem and this is why what I want to emphasize. The problem is you can't go back. Okay, you can't go back. You and I both know that once you lower that number, it's going to be a lot more painful to put the money back to raise it up if you need to. So let's say hypothetically we say, okay, well, let's just push the date out, because right now we say we can put in less and push the date out. But then after all the COVID stuff is factored in, they come back and they say you're going to need to do $1.5 million to get to 2040, right? And you've now pulled it down to $1 million, let's say, right? Then it becomes a big problem, because then you're shifting money away. So I just look at it that these are not bidirectionally equal pain in both directions. So that's why I said I'd stick with the 1.5 regardless of the date, and then say, okay, we can assess every 2 years and see, because once we start tapering, there is no going back.
And look, we've been doing 3 million, and even if we pro forma it, maybe just 2.8 million of free cash a year. So 250 is less than 10% of the free cash. There's ample additional capacity to do other projects, to do, and I want to, I think, I talked to Ben a little bit. I want to work with him on the language of free cash and sort of defining it a little bit. But my goal here is to try to find some sort of compromise with at least one member of the select board, to kind of bring that with, so that when Ken goes and talks with them, that, we have at least some ability to kind of try to meet them.
Yeah, I mean,
while protecting the important things of the financial health of the town.
What I heard in the select board meeting, just to be aware, the notes I write are rough because I'm not a professional scribe, but one thing was, like, my words, not anyone else's in that meeting, was we had a bumper year for free cash, and John Cronin put Travis on the spot to get to the math of why was it, I believe it's 3.6 million,
yep,
when historically it's like 2.5, and it was because we had set aside a lot more money that
right,
actually CARES
yep,
picked up.
It was 3.7.
The next comment that was made. The next comment that, thank you, Ken. The next comment that was made by John that concerned me, John Cronin, that concerned me, is, well, we have so much, every year we're conservative with our revenue and conservative with our spend. Are we overtaxing the citizens? So this relying on this, like, insurance policy or bumper crop or free cash, I think that will, like, trigger some more uncomfortable conversations. So I don't think we should rely on free cash. But Ken, like, I was getting back to, like, the 2333 number. Like, when do we say that we're comfortable that there's not going to be this mythical bump in expenses? You know what I mean? Like, because you're saying we can revisit in 2 years, but how is that going to change in 2 years? Like, we're saying we're scheduled to pay it off 7 years ahead of 2040, and it's 2021 now. So when would we be comfortable to say, let's dial it down? Because 2 years from now, I feel like we'll have the same conversation.
Well, no, and we might, but we'll have another report in those 2 years, and we'll get to see what it says then. And hopefully that'll factor in some of what's been going on with the pandemic that maybe give us a bigger picture. I mean, as I said, my big thing is you can't go back. So because of that, you have to be very cautious in taking your foot off the gas. But the other thing I was going to say, and I think that with regards to the free cash, as Travis pointed out yesterday, right, there were extraordinary circumstances last year that led to a big bump. Okay, the idea, and by the way, I'll put this in a different context, right? We have several stabilization funds, right? We have the OPEB trust, we have the stabilization fund for pension, we have our general stabilization fund. Each of them has an objective, right? We have also the capital expenditure fund, which also, has objectives of its own, but not a straight target in the sense that we're saying, okay, we're trying to get to this point there. We're trying to put away money sufficient to meet our capital needs. So with free cash, good financial practice says you should end up with 3 to 5% free cash on an annual basis, right? And that's because, and let me tell you something, and I hate to use this example, but I'll use it, right? It's like people that are against getting measles vaccines because they grew up in a world that didn't have measles, right? When you grew up and my mother lived through measles killing her friends, And so she was very strongly in favor of a measles vaccine because she's seen the devastation it can do. Okay. It's the same thing with things like free cash, right? People look at it and say, well, we've had good free cash for a while, but there have been times when it's gone fairly low, but we've done a good job of trying to meet the goal, the objective of 3 to 5%, so that the town, when the shocks, look at what happened with the pandemic, right? We were one of the few towns that were able to weather the storm. And again, could you look back and say, well, other towns weathered it? Well, they weathered it because the government bailed them out. But in the early stages of the pandemic, they were firing teachers. They were dealing with all sorts of fiscal emergencies, right? So I don't want to spend too much time on that. But as I said, I just think that everybody has to remember these things. You can have these conversations because most of the people don't remember the bad times. I do. I've been through it 3 times in my tenure on the FinCom, where the revenue drops off the bottom. And then you sit there and say, well, we were comfortable. And then all of a sudden, floor drops out from underneath you. And Governor Romney's coming in and ordering 10% local aid cuts in the middle of a fiscal year. So, the goal is to put in place a framework that makes the town better able to resist financial things. And with regards to giving money back, there's always the option on the warrant. There's an article every October that says we can use some of the free cash to reduce the tax rate, which we did last year. So that there are ways to kind of say, okay, if we want to, we can lower the tax burden. Anyway, Travis and then Dan. Go ahead, Travis.
I was just, so again, the idea here is the FinCom voted the financial policy at the last meeting, and that we were going to discuss that on Monday night. It sounds like, we all understand that there are some things that between the select boards and the FinComs too, we're still going to have some work. Is there any change that I need to be aware of prior to Monday to update the select board on that, I guess would be the question. And obviously Ben shared some of the things that will be discussed, I would say, from the select board.
Well, I don't think we're going to vote on any changes, but I think that, we'll have the discussion on Monday and see where we are and whether we can,
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, the only thing I just wanted to say is, Jay, I watched the meeting too, and I heard John's comments about overtaxing, and I have to say I don't. While people may believe that their tax bills are too high, I don't think that the town is overtaxing based upon our needs. As Travis pointed out, once you sort of pro forma everything down, that free cash is 4%, which is right smack between the 3 to 5% best practices. Furthermore, the select board has a list about a mile long of things that they want to spend money on, both capital and operating budget. So, because the underride comment even was thrown out, which was a permanent reduction in the tax rate rather than just returning money, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, and I've been a proponent of this in the past of having extra money in 1 year, returning that money to the taxpayers like we did last year, but that doesn't permanently reduce your tax base. So anyway, I think that we're doing a prudent job managing the taxpayers' dollars. Free cash is at a reasonable level. It may seem like a large number, and 3 million is a large number, but it is within the best practices and best sort of levels that are deemed to be best practice.
Right, and we know right from the top that we had put in a huge amount in the reserve fund that we ended up being covered by CARES and things like that. So this idea, it's not that budgets had $3.6 million unspent in them, right? There in any given year, there are many one-time types of sources that get in there. And obviously when we were planning and modeling for the pandemic, nobody was sitting there saying, oh, it's going to result in a building boom and everybody buying new cars, right? Which is really what drove a lot of that was, but the flip side of that is that also took away from future purchases, right? So everybody's sitting at home and they're saying, okay, I'm going to remodel my house. Well, that might have been spread out over 3 years before, and now we got it all in 1 year. So the idea that that's going to continue at that level is also misguided, and that every economic forecast is kind of taking that into account, that, just like the chip shortage, right? The capacity's there, but the demand spike was what caused the shortage. So all this demand, when it's finally met, is going to cause a problem in the semi industry in the long, a couple of years out, because 3 years worth of demand is going to be compressed into 1 year. So, okay, Michelle?
First of all, I think Travis did a good job of addressing the underride comment with, talking about future projects that are coming up and the need for having cash for capital projects. So I think that was addressed last night, and there was a good response and a good explanation. I think most people should have understood that. And also about excess, I don't mean excess, but about free cash. I was a chair of a board during a year of 4C cuts. And it's not something pleasant, and it's not something anyone wants to ever live through. So if you don't know what a 4C cut is, it's a cut that comes in the middle of the year when you've already spent half your money. So when you have to make a 10% cut, it's a 20% cut because it's with the remainder of your money, and it's not something anyone wants to live through.
Okay, Ben, you have the last word, and we're moving on.
Thank you. I'll be real quick. I think what I think, I can't speak for John, so exactly, but I've certainly asked questions about this in the past myself, and I can speak that I think what I think we need to be careful about is, yes, it's in target. Yes, it's free cash is about where it should be. I'm not saying anything is incorrect there, but I think we need to occasionally assess the assumptions that we make that lead us that about revenue, about department, about spending and things like that. And that doesn't mean you change anything, but it does mean that you think about why you do the things that you do, and you don't just do it because you've always done it that way. And it doesn't mean, so what I think we should be doing on an occasional basis is just asking some questions about the assumptions we make about different points in revenue, and about, if we can pick on any number of items there. And I think that I think is an important conversation we should be having about the budget process. And I know, I believe that John is probably leading down that kind of a path to sort of say, like, what are we doing? And is it the right thing to do? And the answer is maybe yes. Maybe there is nothing that we need to change, but there might be some things that we should tweak. And I don't think there's anything wrong, as we're a board that's we spend money, and we have an obligation to be fiscally responsible, and we also should know what we're spending it on, how we're spending it, and are we doing something that we shouldn't be doing, or should we be doing more of it? I don't know, but I think we have to have some of those kinds of deeper conversations, and I think that's an important process, and I think that's where John was going with it, and I believe I agree. I agree with that. That doesn't mean change. It just means let's make sure we're doing the right things. So that's all I'll say. Thank you for giving me a second.
Yep, no problem. And I'll just point out for the record, since you said it, that we do review that every year. That's part of our process for working with the town administrator on the assumptions we use to build the budget. So just to be clear, I'm just saying we don't do this. So we do this every year. We reassess everything every year. So anyway, let's move on. So Travis, do you have anything else?
No, I'll see you Monday night.
Okay. So the next up is capital requests for October town meeting. So Vin, do you want to handle that?
Sure. I just asked that Travis put up on the screen so we're all looking at it, because I know they came in with a new item last night.
So we added last week the fence related to closing out the rail trail project. So to the folder that you all have access to, I added some pictures in case there's any questions on what that is. And I will pull up the capital here. Hold on, give me 1 second. Oops, I have the old one. Actually, you know what I'll do? If you don't mind, I'll use this as an opportunity to just show where all the information is in case anybody hasn't checked it out. So if you go into the capital budget here, so this is everything broken down by article number. In here is the backup here. I added the fence quote, and then here's the summary page that we had all discussed with the one in red is the latest update. And James confirmed that this number will get us where we're going on the completion of that.
What's the asterisk with the 6,500 from grant? What does that mean?
So the total valuation is more like $20,000. We still have $6,500 left in the grant. And that is going to be used to offset the total cost. But the $6,500 left in the grant will not cover the total price left on what we need to close out the project.
And this is just the chain link, or this is the privacy one too?
This would be privacy slats in a rubber fence that James Keese had discussed with the capital
So
subcommittee.
vinyl coated chain link fence.
So it looks nice.
Looks nicer, and there's going to be the privacy. So actually, if I can pull this down and then just show the fence. I was out there with Karen Sherman today. So it's on this side as you roll in. Obviously, everything over here turned out as we had anticipated. This is the fence right here. So there's issues with working with the property owner to potentially remove the fence that exists, and it is leaning. There's quite a bit of tree growth in that. So if we were to remove that fence, which would be preferable, so we don't end up with two fences that end up with trash in between, but it would be this side right here.
So just currently, the fence that's there currently, is that on the private property or on the town's property?
That current fence is on private property. It is privately owned. I
Where is
believe they would be interested in having it removed.
How far away is the town property? Is it like a 6 inches or foot? Trying to think in my mind's eye.
I think 6 inches more than a foot.
Okay.
Okay. I'm thinking more along the lines of the trees. That's why I was wondering, because if there's
Yeah.
tree work required there, are the trees on the town property or the?
No, they're all on, if he's saying 6 feet, 6 inches, it's closer to there's no trees on that side. And actually there's some trees growing on the fence, into the fence, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Well, the only reason I'm asking is because I just want to make sure that when we consider this request, we're not going to find out there's tree work required that we can't do.
No.
So,
No, I think we're comfortable with where this had originally been put in. We just wanted to make sure we did our due diligence and the quote was updated.
okay. Okay, Jay?
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable asking it last night, but the 13.5, why wouldn't we try to get that from CPA or CPC funds versus?
It's a good question, and it's something I kind of wanted. It's more of a timing issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Travis. But it was because they're going through, we need the thing to close out the grant. I guess we could ask for reimbursement.
Frank's got nothing he's not presenting anything to vote on.
Yeah, so it really came down to when the CPC had their request deadline. This one is, sort of, you're right. It was originally tied to the CPC, and we covered this with the capital subcommittee. But essentially what happened was CPC authorized the total project, understanding that we were waiting on a grant. The grant came in, CPC turned back all the funding. So there is no funding waiting there. I can't just charge it to it. The money literally has been turned back. So it would need to be a new appropriation. And with that, by the time I had added this, which, I don't like adding things late, but I think it was important enough to do so. That I had missed that opportunity. And, I think for the amount of money or the amount of benefit that we received from that grant, we're coming up with a relatively small hard dollar match to go with the hours of Karen Sherman, Tom Smith, and myself.
Okay.
I don't disagree with you. If this had come up when the CBC was still sort of having that open discussion, I would have gone that route.
I might be oversimplifying it, and shame on me that, can we get them to post meet and, take the money from that account? Because I understand what you're telling me.
They're not the quickest group to meet and vote.
Well, Jay knows that. He's been through it before.
Okay.
Well, Ken, that's where I disagree. I thought I thought you were very helpful with the bridge project, especially Ken, but I thought that committee was very responsive and very helpful. Like, I asked them for a lot of money for that project, and they did not put up any blockers. So that's the only reason, based on my experience, that's why I was kind of scratching my head thinking that Frank could pull one off to come take that.
I'll rephrase what I said. What I meant was they are rigid because they have to be in terms of their process to get to a town meeting. So that's the real issue here, right? Because they have a set of deadlines. We missed, we meaning the town missed the deadline. And so it would have to go to May.
If this was $100,000, I would,
Yeah, I know. We spent 13 grand talking about it, so I agree.
And then if the chair of the capital subcommittee or the chair of the finance committee doesn't mind just me making one other point, because I think most of this otherwise has been covered. The HVAC, I talked to Keith Bidet today. He has a very detailed itemized list on all the HVAC needs, including the justification of the larger units, which is why this number is 500,000. That had been requested by the select board and the capital subcommittee. So I did confirm with him today that we'll have that information for all of us to peruse. But again, I think most groups are comfortable with the number. It's really just people wanting the backup, and Keith will be delivering that. So
Yeah, and just one thing I'd say on that, and I kind of brought this up in the subcommittee, but I think that I know that a lot of this was in the original capital plan from the Collins Center, because I know that Keith had given them a bunch of this stuff. But I do think, given the conversation we had around this 500,000, that's something that you probably need to spend a little time with Keith on to, kind of figure out how we're going to address these things, right? Because there are going to be other units that need to be replaced and things like that, and have kind of maybe it's just this fund just gets replenished when we buy one. But I mean, I think there are arguments to be made that at some point we want to start really just replacing them if they're 30 years old, type of thing,
I agree. No, and I think, again, based on my conversation with Keith today, I believe that the information that we all requested and are expecting is on its way.
Okay. So
I know there was discussion. Yeah, I know there was discussion about the dollar amount and everything like that. And so is the members of the select board okay with this? The 500,000, that is. Not that it matters, but it's a questionable thing.
They want the information, and I ensured them after discussing with Keith today that's coming. And so I believe they approved this list and did not ask for it to be removed.
Okay. So, and
They being the select board? I'm sorry.
Board, yes. The capital subcommittee voted to pass this list with requesting more information on the fencing, because I didn't have it at the time, to the full finance committee, which is why it's on the agenda this evening, and Vin and Ken can cover that. The select board, as sort of looking at the articles, has been presented with this list and was presented with the change. They asked the questions that led to some of the information that I'm working on to get from Keith, which was also discussed with the capital subcommittee. It's parallel conversations leading to the same endpoint.
Yeah.
So Ben, I trust you, and I know the subcommittee is there to do it, so that not everything's debated in the main forum. But when I sat through the presentation and I listened to some of the questions from the select board, especially John's, because he's going through a very similar issue with his day job, it seemed like a big number. And I'm not an engineer, but some of the things I heard just didn't add up. So the select board will get an explanation of what the 500 is about, but we're being asked to bless that 500 without getting the explanation, right?
Well, we have an explanation. We've listened to both Keith and Elisa from the school committee. Now, it's basically a set aside to have as a reserve in case one of the units, and specifically the rooftop unit above the auditorium in the high school, goes. Their estimate is about $500,000. If another unit goes, they're going to use it, and we'll talk about replenishing the fund or whatever. The other option, which I threw out there and I didn't hear, I heard whispers or nothing, was moving the $500,000 to increasing the reserve fund and having it come out of the reserve fund. They need to come before us asking specifically if one of the units blows up, rather than using up, restricting capital and tying it up. I mean, it's really, problem with that is it's a reserve fund and you got to have it every year, versus capital. It's just moving money from one bucket to another. Yes, it's restricted. It's restricted specifically for HVAC. So you can say, well, we have less control over it. Half a dozen, 1/6 the other, you're trusting them, and they're being very frugal, and they don't want to put money into a building that they're hoping beyond hope that we're going to get replaced. I think they're hoping.
So Ben, if I might propose something, I have requested that the school committee meet with us next week before we vote on this, because I want to have a further discussion before voting for any further appropriations for the school committee about the tuition-free full-day kindergarten implementation.
Okay.
They seem hesitant with that, if not downright not wanting to do it. But I think that, it may be helpful for Jay for them to come and actually discuss with us this capital request directly from them, so we can get the questions asked directly.
Well, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to hijack that decision.
Jay, normally
the capital decision, though. Like, I just want to make sure that's clear. Like, I don't support that, Dan. I'm just asking about 500K.
I'm just trying to I'm not suggesting you do. I'm just trying to sort of create a synergies with their time and with different things that we each want. I'm not suggesting that you are where I am. I'm just saying.
But Vin might have addressed I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. Vin, that 500K can only be used for HVAC and HVAC expenditure, correct?
That's the way, if we put the warrant up there, and we bandied about having a special line item where we say they have to come before us every year and we talk about it. I mean, so there's a lot of things going out. So, and I think we need to clarify what we want, because it's either going to be part of this budget article, or we need to clarify exactly what we want for this one line.
But for the specific question that Jay just asked, right? The way that this article is written is controlled. The internal control of that is the town accountant. So no, they cannot spend this on anything that is not related to HVAC, including rooftop units that are related to HVAC within the district, right? That's the way it's written, and it's relatively broad for that purpose, but it could not be used on something that is not HVAC. If they had another thing break, they would need to come to town meeting. If something was related to the HVAC list that has led to this thing that was originally put on the Collins Center has been carried forward, then it could be used out of this $500,000 before the next town meeting.
I'm good. And Ken, you made a good point about a maintenance program plan, because this is like whack-a-mole, but I'm comfortable now based on what I heard. I wouldn't need anyone from the school committee to present on that based on what Vin, you shared, and Travis, what you just explained. So, and thanks, Ken, for hearing me out on it.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the issue is that you have a bunch of these older units, and kudos to Keith for figuring out how to keep them running well past their prime. But at some point, it becomes just diminishing value to do that. Is my point. And so
they're stripping other unit. They're trying to find scrap units to keep those units going. So it's not on this warrant, but like Ken, hopefully, I hope in the future we could have a conversation with the school committee about the maintenance program.
Well, as I said, it was on this replacement of these units was on the original capital plan. So I'm sure we'll have that conversation in the future.
I'm good. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, Dan, you want to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I still have my concerns about continuing to sort of put money into the schools until we have a broader discussion about all this money that's been spent on tuition-free full-day kindergarten. So I support tuition-free full-day kindergarten. I think that this HVAC plan is good, but I think that we need to get on the conversation about the tuition-free full-day kindergarten, and before I'm going to be able to vote to support this to go on, to go into the finance committee report, I really want to have a conversation with this one.
So are you recommending to not vote on this tonight?
I won't vote for this tonight, certainly.
Okay.
So
this is the tuition-free full-day kindergarten is been implemented. It's $650,000 to $700,000 a year that and we have no plans on.
But I think it's a separate thing. I totally agree. That's a concern, but I think you're talking apples and oranges, and we're giving them a pot of money to use for HVAC, not for the schools.
No, I understand. It's somewhat different, but I've asked. I thought that we had an agreement, and I don't want this tuition-free full-day kindergarten discussion to continue to get pushed off. And I think that it's something that needs to be done before we get into normal, regular budget season. There's also, other contracts and things that are being negotiated and whatnot. And this, we need to have it earlier. And I just think that.
Well, can I point? I'm of the opinion I don't think we should really hold hostage this thing. I mean, we're not.
I'm not holding anything hostage. I just want to have a quick conversation.
But you can still have a conversation, but regardless of the CapEx.
Right, and I will say that the request has been made, right? Having, after we had our discussion about full-day kindergarten and the potential financial ramifications, I did reach out to the school committee, the budget subcommittee chair, and point out that we would like to see them here to have a plan sooner rather than later.
And then I made the request, and then they continue to sort of, push us off. So that to me is not an appropriate, way of going about, spending the town's money.
Is there any, as you see here, is there any backup that anybody did not, anything that's missing in terms of outside of, as I said, information coming from the schools, which I'm expecting and we've all discussed with them from this list, or any questions that I can answer for the broader
right.
audience?
That's what I was going to say. Let's.
Well, do we have a policy for the camera jam?
No, the work that they've done on the policies is determining that it probably will not sit with public safety. It would be an IT related policy, and so gaining the ones that are in our neighboring communities to look at and have a draft.
Okay, so that's another one I don't know if we can vote on tonight.
So do we want to? I mean,
we don't have to vote on this until next week, or even
right. We don't have to vote till next week. So if that's what my question was going to be. Obviously I've been a part of the capital subcommittee. We've had some of these discussions. I do know, and everybody has heard me say this before, right? I have significant concerns as well about the cameras until policy exists. So I know that that's in the works. So I think that's something we want to talk about. If we want to wait another week, I could bring that, potentially mention that to the select board on Monday when I'm there, and just say, this is a concern of the committee, and see where they stand on that, or what their plans are to develop the policy. I really do have mixed signals, no pun intended, or mixed feelings about that particular item for that reason, because I see the need for the public safety issue, but I do think that in this day and age, it really has to go with the policy. I mean, I'm not saying anything I haven't said for weeks, right? But to a bigger picture, does anybody, if there are questions people have about this, what I'd really like to do tonight is identify what or who we need to have here to give us the additional information, right? Because we can vote on it next week, but I don't want to get into that situation and have to say, okay, well, we need Chief Stone here or somebody, right? Let's identify from this list, if people have, if the committee has issues with certain items, let's identify who we want to have come in. And then I can just, contact those people and say, we'd like you to come in to talk about your request. Obviously, most of these, Travis has all the background, but there may be things where Travis is representing a requester where we want to have discussions that go beyond, Travis's representation. So, okay, Jay?
Yeah, I'm looking at Travis, the supporting detail for this is super helpful. It's the 45K for the next one. No, the 61.6. My apologies. Keep going. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I feel like the slow kid, because I was reading that and I see in the description justification, lots of numbers, but then when I look at the schedule, it's like 15K, 11K. Like I couldn't tie the description and justification to the line item for equipment. And I feel silly asking that, but
oh, that's fine. So we actually, let me just cover one thing, which is on
Ken's
the
point,
policy.
just trying to understand the number, not questioning it.
Yeah, no, I got you. And James Keys put this together and answered questions for the capital subcommittee. So I'm going to hand it over to him. I just want to do on the policies. Chris Mayo, Chief Stone, Chief Cassidy are meeting on the policy tomorrow. And so, by next week, that won't be a problem, I believe, to have at least an update. Whether that, sways the group or not, that's, up to you guys. And then on the question related to Jay, James, you are here. Could you answer the question of how this request looks and as a phase-in?
Yeah, certainly. James Keys, facility manager. If you look at the very bottom there, Travis just zoomed in, the bulk of a lot of the costs are the very large units for 20-ton units for the Grand Hall. Those are past their useful life, but we're not going to replace them until they break. They're basically not critical. So if you if you add up all of the replacement costs and withdraw about $166,000, it gives you remaining $46,600. And that's what I've spread out over the course of 5 years. Does that help explain? The reason, here's the thing, it's sort of the same thing that, we're talking about with the schools. These units are working. The critical ones that, are serving office spaces that we can, proactively replace. But the others, it's going to be a replace as you go, as they fail.
Yeah, James, let me interrupt you. I'm definitely I get it. Things are past their useful life. So I'm not questioning the validity of the ask. I'm just trying to literally just understand, not questioning. Because you said the last bullet in the description, remaining is $46K to be spread over whatever years, but the schedule says 61. I'm just trying to understand the numbers. That's all.
Right, and this is been changed a little bit as well over the course. I can go back and relook at the calculations. These circulator pumps was a new ad.
I guess they don't, the 46 and the 61 don't need to tie to each other. The estimates. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
It's the 15,000 in year one, Jay. The 46 is fiscal 23 through 26. Okay. So really your question is, what's the 15 for in year one, James?
That is for, it's for these pumps, as well as one of the units that's now actually servicing the HR office is beyond its useful life, and it's one that should be replaced somewhere in this year, or FY23.
Okay.
So
I'm good.
So there's the 8,000 for the two pumps that you have there at 4,000 each, right?
Right.
And then there's another 7,000 somewhere.
And that unit that's in my eyes, that's where the next unit that's going to need to be replaced.
And James, if you don't mind, just because Jay, I don't think was here for the duration of the conversation last year, and just very, very high level, what the information is that we're now pulling out of Dude Solutions and how that feeds into some of these items.
Yeah, so as part of the Dude Solutions software that we brought on board the beginning, the end of FY21, was a condition assessment of all the major assets in the buildings. And so all of this equipment was reviewed, checked, graded, repair information was all entered into this software. And the software then can calculate expected remaining life based off of these initial conditions assessments, as well as what that cost would be in future dollars. So if we, put in the air handler for, the left side of Town Hall, and it's rated as average and it has 2 years left, it would extrapolate out for 2 years what the replacement cost of that particular unit would be. And so what we can do, and the software then has extrapolated this out to 2040, actually. So we have that information. And again, it's not, cast in stone. Something can break sooner, something can last longer, but at least gives us a guideline that allows us to do things like we've done here to break out what will likely need to be replaced in the future years.
Okay, so you enter all that stuff in, the software says, here's what you should forecast for some run rate of spend. And that's what the schedule looks like. All right, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
And I will, yeah, okay, that's fine. I was just going to say that the math is a little fuzzy there, but that's what he's using. Okay,
yeah, now they explain, he's taking all things calculating, and then the thing's calculating, well, we think typically this machine will last X. And then they're saying just from a forecast perspective, budget 15 and then 11K, and hopefully it's over, hopefully it's under, blah blah blah. I get it. It's a forecast.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
actual.
Michelle.
Just two comments. One, I wanted to congratulate James on passing your test.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it was going back to college.
Yeah.
It was, 4 courses and 3 courses, 4 exams, and a year in the making. So yeah, it was actually quite fascinating. I mean, it's interesting stuff. But thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then to Travis, I just wanted to say thank you for just writing police vehicles without being too specific on the warrant. I assume that's how the warrant's going to be written this year, without being really specific.
It will be.
Okay, good.
Okay, Mr. Alfred.
Is just on that, are we doing mainly, still doing mainly the SUVs though, because they have longer lives, or are we mixing it up now?
Yeah, so that's what Chief Stone had written up that report. Actually, I'm going to make sure that I gave that to the broad finance committee. I know I provided it to the capital subcommittee. Chief Stone wrote up his whole report, and it is a continuation of the fleet schedule that we've been doing. No major changes.
So, and then just lastly to the chair, I do actually, have a couple questions about the HVAC units that I would like to pose to the school committee.
Okay, I will reach out and ask somebody to come here to represent them. Okay, anybody else have any other things that we need on this? Okay, so I guess we'll wait till next week to take the vote on the final thing. Partly because I want to find out about where the policies, the policy goes on this cameras. But I would strongly, as I said, next week is the final week for us to vote, which is fine because, things are still not final on the select board side either. But just make sure that if there's any information you need, that you let me know ahead of next Tuesday. Yep. Go ahead, Jay.
Ken, question for you on the cameras. So if you are concerned about the way the policy is written, like, we're a financial committee, and I'm not like, help me understand, because you know what I mean? Like you've told me on other calls, we're a financial policy committee. In some ways we can use our voice
I know what you're getting to, Jack.
But just help me understand that, and I really mean that. It's not like a rhetorical.
Yeah, no, I can give it to you in a nutshell. Right? I can give it to you in a nutshell. Okay, it's not that there is. I personally have any dispute with the policy. It's that there is no policy. When there is no policy, and you're talking about things like recording things that you may or may not capture, you may inadvertently capture other things, that exposes potentially the town to significant legal liability. If, for example, something was captured on the cameras and the appropriate privacy and wasn't respected, and some of that got out and caused somebody harm, they could sue the town and say the town had no legal right, or the person who, what if somebody posts something on Facebook or posts something on Instagram that causes harm to a person in their career or something like that, they could sue the town. So the financial aspect of not having a policy is it exposes us to legal risk. That's why I want a policy. Because without that, when you have a policy and it's vetted and in place and defensible, there are internal controls to make sure the policy is followed. When you have nothing, literally nothing right now, okay, then you put up these cameras, anything that happens with that violates the law or that somehow causes harm to somebody exposes the town to a lawsuit. That's why I want that. That's the financial aspect. So it is incumbent upon us, and I would say, regardless of the traffic cameras, there have been other issues that are fall in that same bucket where, we've approved expenses, and I'll give you a good example. There have been times when, one good example was recently with the Woodland Street thing, right? We approved money to tear that down. They find, asbestos or whatever in the building, right? Once that is found, we have an obligation to clean it up, because if that is not taken care of, there's a big financial risk there, right? We knew about a hazard and we failed to correct it. So that's the financial connection, is that anything that exposes us to liability, we as a finance committee have to consider that risk and say, we have a financial obligation to mitigate that risk to keep the town from getting sued.
So Travis is town council. Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
I was just going to say, so again, they're going to meet on a policy tomorrow. I don't disagree that a policy should be in place. I don't know that the policy is going to meet the expectations of the Finance Committee. And I think at that point, the question between, whether we feel that the policy makes sense for the town and is justified on the town side may then leave the realm of whether or not there's financial component of liability and those types of things. So, but I don't disagree that a policy should be in place. And again, we've been working on that. And, you don't want to rush a policy, I guess would be the point.
Yeah, and
Do we need
as
to
I
read
said, I
that
don't,
policy, Ken, then?
What?
You know what I mean? 'Cause you want to see a policy by next week. So do we need to read it and then with a financial
Okay.
lens? Make sure
just to be
it's
clear,
covered?
we're not setting the policy. What we can do though is whatever policy is put in place by the select board, if town council says, hey, this policy, avoids legal risk, then we're fine with it, right? To your point, right? It's not our job to make the policy.
Yeah.
It's our job to make sure that the town is minimizing legal risk exposure that has financial implications. So let them make the policy. That's what I want them to do. And that's why, I've been saying this for a long time is we're not the ones to make the policy, but there has to be a policy there because otherwise we put these things up and, one lawsuit and it dwarfs the $91,000 we spent on the cameras, right?
So the policy won't hold us up next week. You want to see, is there a policy, and regardless of how well or poorly written, in your opinion, it is, we would still vote?
The policy doesn't have to be final, but it has to exist in some way or be worked on, but it also has to be something that we as a committee with the advice of town council can be reasonably sure is protecting the town from legal liabilities. In other words, if the policy comes out and says, we take all the camera footage and we stream it live, right? Then that's a problem, right? If they come back and say, this is our policy and town council has said that if we do X, Y, and Z, that we were protected, then that's fine, right? I don't want to get into the policy making part of it. I just want to make sure something exists, right?
Are we going to get that, the like what Ken said, Travis, the town council's opinion on the policy by the time next week comes around and we go to vote on our budget?
I don't know. But I mean, I think if we come up with a policy and it's clearly here's the policy that towns use for this type of thing, and I wouldn't have the select board sign off on a policy before town council reviewed it, I guess is the best I could tell you. Whether or not I can turn around from Chief Cassidy, Stone, Chris Mayo's conversation, a policy that then is reviewed by Jay Talman and approved by the select board, I don't know. That's probably a tight timeline, but as I discussed with the capital subcommittee, I fully appreciate the perspective here, and I think that I don't disagree with the intent, and I intend on following through with that.
Yeah,
just some history. We've been requesting this for years because it's been requested a number of times.
Yeah. So that. But the other thing I would point out is if I don't like to do this in general, but if we have a particular issue that needs more time before town meeting, we can always vote to make a recommendation at town meeting. And
that's what I was going to say.
So that's why I said if it comes down to where they say, okay, we're going to have something, we're going to put it in place before October 18th or whatever, then we can say, okay, we'll vote to make a recommendation at town meeting. And then, we just take our vote before town meeting and then we tell town meeting on the floor what our recommendation is.
Yeah,
not ideal.
That's my point. I understand what your thought process is, and I'm looking at like just trying to get a deliverable done, and it sees tight. So yeah, I think I understand the game plan. So I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add that unlike a private citizen who puts up a Ring doorbell or something like that when the town starts recording things, I mean, I don't know all the rules, but it becomes public records, and if you don't handle it properly or protect it properly or put it or destroy it after a short period of time, it becomes subject. It's easier to obtain certainly than someone else's private recordings. And I think that, while it certainly, this is partially the select board's job and the town administrator's job is to, protect the citizens. There are lots of privacy concerns here. And I think that, we would not be doing our due diligence and the financial oversight if we did not,
Well, I told you, I just see the legal risk and
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Having dealt with legal issues before that the town, it's got to come before the town.
These cameras are going to capture
they get very expensive. So, okay. So any other questions? So as I said, if everybody looks through the supporting material, let me know what, if there's anything, anybody else wants any additional information before next week, and we'll take the vote next week on it. Okay. So just let me know with enough time to get somebody. Don't tell me next Tuesday at 6 that you need somebody. So, okay. So we'll put that. Okay. So next up is the review of the warrant. Everybody should have the material that Travis has sent out concerning the warrant. The warrant is it's closed, but not final. And just to be clear, right, I did have a conversation, email exchange with Tina, the chair of the select board, about the timing for all this, and she's comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. She said that she'll have everything locked down, that they'll have everything locked down and final by next Tuesday. And she understands that's our drop dead date for getting things in the report. So nobody's stressing too much yet. Go ahead, Travis.
So we had a discussion last night of whether or not the select board was interested in me posting on Thursday night to cover anything. So the warrant needs to be posted 14 days prior, and that would be the absolute drop dead date would be next Tuesday. And it will be during business hours, right? So my intention right now is to not wait until next week. I'd prefer it to be out for people to review. I don't believe at this moment, unless anything changes between now and the time that I get to a final version, that I will be having another meeting in the select board. What they approved last night would be the basics of what I can go through this evening and what I've added to. I'm waiting on a little bit of wording as it relates to one of the articles, but it won't substantively change it. It's about tweaking sort of specific language related to, and I can get into that if we want, on the sidewalk article as it relates to a grant application with complete streets. And I just want to marry the language together. So I just want to sort of correct a little bit, right? We'll be discussing next week, certainly, if we print the warrant by this Friday, then next week obviously you'll still have the benefit of another meeting before the FinCom recommendations, and then I'll work with the chair on getting the FinCom recommendations posted by the 8th. So I put that in the email as well. But that's my intention at the moment, unless something goes haywire. I believe the information that we discussed with the select board, while there's tweaking to be done, there's not changes to the substance.
Yeah. Jay, you got a question?
Yeah, another place where I was confused. So last night when Stan Tech presented, the net was that everything is driven by the water plan, and the sidewalks are integrated into the water plan. Like, you don't go around, and then there's all kinds of complexities with sidewalks. Like, it's all recorded. You could watch it. So the bottom line was, like, the water mains drive the sidewalk plan. And when I look at this, I'm like, are these all things that we don't have any risk of getting ripped up when we start doing installing water lines? Like, Hollis Street was one of the lines on the schedule, and I thought the high school was on the map. Or Hollis, with you guys were talking about the application that the engineer had yesterday. It was pretty slick, and she had it all phased out. There were a lot of lines that were colored in town when she had checked all the boxes. So
I think Ben probably can speak to the longer term and what you're addressing and what Stan Tech spoke to. But let me just sort of address specifically this warrant. I think, the grander conversations between, what will lead to a 5, 10, 20-year plan on water and sidewalks certainly is a discussion that is probably more on the May timeline, especially if borrowing is going to be discussed with any type of article. What came out of both reports, I would say, in terms of looking at this warrant, is there anything that the town needs to be doing that is not going to prohibit us from having that long-term conversation, but benefits us to be getting moving ahead on now and not giving up the period between October and May. And so one of the items specifically that I requested, and I felt bad because she gave a great presentation and the tool that she used was phenomenal, which we'll have access to and overlays our GIS system. But at the same point, I just wanted to make sure, when it relates to this warrant, what they're saying is their priority project, which does not have any overlap or synergy with sidewalks, is completing connection points on two in an area that is related to when the well number 5 water treatment plant comes online in 2021, making sure that there's bidirectional flow from that. And then if there was a water main break, that we would not lose that, right? And so what they put as their top priority project in the article that's in here in the file that I did the write-up on for anybody to read, and if there's any questions on that, is the design and engineering and permitting, because one of them goes into a culvert. The design, engineering, and permitting of those two connection points. And that's it for right now. And I think the rest of that tool, as you said, there's a lot of connection between the sidewalks and the water that we need to discuss. So then on the sidewalk side, again, for this particular warrant, everything you just said, I don't disagree with. The approach to this particular warrant is we are in the first year where we are about to put in an application to get $400,000 from Mass DOT from the Complete Streets program. And related to that, but also taking the information from Stantec, is addressing a number of ADA compliance issues when it comes to our sidewalks, one, but then also the ramps and ways to access the sidewalk network. And so the $630,000 per year approach that Stantec has laid out in the sidewalk or pedestrian accessibility report in year one is, my anticipation is that $400,000 of that will be covered through the Complete Streets. And what I'm proposing and what the select board discussed last night is covering the delta there of $230,000 in this warrant with the projects identified.
So let me ask you a very short question, because I get all that. If we spend $230 and we do what's on this punch list, are we going to rip any of this up within the next 5 years? Let's just say.
Right. And so the answer is no, right? The idea is that we would not, now that we have both, we would be looking specifically at projects that we understand. And now that we have, again, the tool that you saw live last night,
Yeah.
We now have the ability to do those projects that are not going to then get ripped up, right? I think that's
So this has all been reconciled into the tool. You keep talking about the tool. So all of these are already entered in so that when she was showing the map and like checking all the boxes and all the colors are there, where these punch list items don't overlap with anything else that's going on in the streets or the water.
In this October warrant, that's where we are. Yeah.
What punch list are you looking at? Because I don't see anything under the sidewalks article.
So there's two things. If you look in the sidewalks folder, the crosswalk.
It's Holliston _ complete streets _ tier 2 plan.
Yeah, so the tier 2 is the Complete Streets plan. And so that was another thing that I was very happy with last night to see. Obviously, we hired Stantec to do two separate, and we got two separate plans, and we had two separate engineering teams within Stantec doing those. So the expectation was that they would be talking and working together. The fact that they rolled in the Complete Streets tier 2 prioritization plan was what I really wanted to see last night, and I thought they did a good job with, because not only are we going to be able to leverage that when we're talking about our own water projects that then may have sidewalks or may not, but we're also going to be able to use that in our conversations with Mass DOT on any state-owned roadway, because that's what drives the Complete Streets, obviously, it is a state-owned project, the Mass DOT Complete Streets.
I didn't quite follow your answer, Travis. So basically, if we spend $230K, whatever we're spending $230K on and we build will not get ripped up when we replace water lines or redo streets.
That is the idea. And I think that we have the ability to prove that out with the tool that we went over last night.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll let Ben comment, then Dan, but then I just want to remind everybody, what I'd like to do is just walk through the warrant, have Travis share it and just walk through it real quick. And just like we did with capital, decide if there's things we need to get set for next week. So we're prepared to vote. So we don't have to just do it nebulously. We'll walk through the articles. Go ahead, Ben.
Just one point of clarification on one of the comments that Jay made. The reports from Stantec were, Erica did a great job, and the tool is pretty cool to see. If you guys have a chance to watch our meeting to see what the tool looks like, it's going to be a pretty useful, powerful tool for us to be able to look at all these infrastructure projects. But the recommendation of Stantec was certainly to have the water main projects drive the other infrastructure projects. While I think that is certainly, an important piece of it. The select board hasn't put together a long range plan that's built that way. That doesn't mean it's not going to be. It just means that this was just the consultant's opinions about what we should be doing, and I'm sure we'll probably be pretty in line with that. But I think at the same time, I want to just be clear that this is a consultant's outcome, and it's in draft form, as she pointed out last night. There's a few more details that need to be completed, and it's not necessarily exactly what the select board is looking at for those types of infrastructure projects at this time.
I think we're spending a lot of money with those consultants, and she expressed it multiple times as a guiding principle. So
I understand. I'm not saying we're not doing that. I'm just saying that was the consultant's opinion. It is not the select board's opinion, is all I'm saying.
all right,
That doesn't mean it won't be. It just means that it isn't at this time.
right. That's what I expressed. That's what she said. That was the consultant's opinion.
Yeah.
So we can go through more of this when we get to it, but I mean, I do have a lot of reservations about some of this, and the fact that it seems like we're just trying to push something because of a timeline of town meeting. But I would also like to circle back on the sidewalk piece to see sort of, what the overall plan is. Are we really adopting this 630 a year? How many years is that? Are we looking at all the projects that we actually want, or all the projects that they sort of had on there? I thought we were going to sort of start small with this, and it's really the full 630, with some of it's coming obviously from complete streets. But anyway, we can circle back to that. But I do have a number of questions and concerns.
Okay. But wait till we get there. Okay. Michelle? You're on mute, Michelle.
Last night she was talking about connections to the new treatment facility. Were those included in the cost of the treatment facility, or are those in addition to it? Were those already calculated?
No. So what we're talking about on this warrant, and if in the folder that you have access to on that one, I put the narrative in. And actually, let me pull it up right now, because then I'll just.
I was going to say, why don't you pull up the warrant so we can walk through it?
I thought it was. It's didn't come from me, which is why I can say it's well written without. All right. So in your folder here, if you go down to Article 11, water infrastructure. So any of the ones, when you go in the folder, if it says the article number, that's the narrative. I think there's only one now that doesn't have it, that I'm still waiting on. And so the 2 points, and I need to streamline this a little bit. Again, as I said, it's just the tweaking of the wording. So we're talking about 4,300 feet of water main in 2 areas: Essential Street at Gretchen Lane to existing water main on Bullard. That is essentially creating a loop, right? So again, the bidirectionality. And then as well as the new water main across the existing culvert under 5th Street. And then the reasons to do those projects are closely related to the new water treatment plan, eliminates 2 ends, provides bidirectional flow from the new treatment plan. So the answer to the question is no, these were not built into that water treatment plan. These are the pipes in the ground that we're optimizing now, so that when the plant comes online, if we were to have a water main break in the way that the water was flowing, it would flow the other way, right? Whereas if we don't create that bidirectional flow, we then have a water main break that takes well number 5 offline.
Right, but I thought she was talking about in the future. I'm sorry, I don't mean, so she was talking about this. I thought she was talking about something in the future too. And that got me wondering about when we connect the new, am I thinking too far ahead?
Yeah, I mean, some of the questions, yeah, she did address the question, because I had it on, what the dead end situation in town is. We've heard for some residents are having water quality issues, and dead ends are part of some of those reasons. I think she did a good job of explaining that we are not, through this process and what they laid out, going to be able to remove every dead end from the system. And there are other solutions to some of those, but that these 2 that we're talking about, design, engineering, and permitting in this warrant, are related to the system, creating an advantage in the system entirely once that well comes online.
Okay, so then it's not gonna, because then I got confused with the connecting the 2. If you connect 2, then they're just going to be slashing, or I
I think that she tried to make the point that we cannot remove every dead end from the system. And I think that it was a point that was being made that was a valuable point, but not necessarily made sense in the context of last night's presentation.
I think it was around like, why don't we do looping everywhere? And she was describing like, you can't just wholeheartedly have a closed loop in every part of the system, but was advocating that the what's on the warrant absolutely should be done to optimize the value of the water treatment plant.
But you can't do it everywhere.
Yeah, that's what she was getting at when she's like, sometimes you'll just have competing flows and blah blah blah. She was, I think it came up because someone's like, why shouldn't we do looping everywhere? Have a complete closed loop system? And she was like, no, that's not. It sounds like a good idea, but it's not always a good idea.
Okay.
Yep.
And in those instances, her recommendation and some is to make sure that we have the capacity to do blow-offs, right? And that, financially, that's going to accomplish the water quality improvements that we're looking for, but not put a lot of money into infrastructure projects that don't have benefit to the full system. But it was, considering the larger context of the presentation and the tool, it was a little out of context.
Okay, so there wasn't this. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, this is their number one, and I tried to put, again, I'm a little annoyed that I don't have the presentation from last night in the folder for you and online for residents. I will make sure that it gets on there, and then the report as well. But what was covered in the Holliston Reporter is the screen grabs of her presentation. I pulled the one that gave her list, right? And what we have on this warrant is number one, which is closing those two loops, creating the bidirectional flow coming out of that new plant when it comes online in 22, and that then we are covered in the event of a water main break, that we don't shut that plant down. That's their number one priority.
Okay, but when the plant goes online, then that'll be it. There are not going to be other connections that are going to have to be made that we're not looking at now.
I believe that the two that are highlighted in this article are the two priority ones. Whether or not there's other places that they're going to recommend looping. Again, what I saved out here is the top 5 projects. The number 2 actually happens to be Fisk, which we discussed in a number of contexts. Not Fisk, I apologize, Norfolk, which we've discussed in a number of contexts, sidewalks and water. This one that's on this town meeting, it does not have a sidewalk component, which again is one of the reasons that it makes a lot of sense for this warrant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Travis, do you want to do a quick walkthrough? Just pull up the warrant, and we'll just, as I said, the intent here is just to very quickly step through. It's 20 articles now, something like that. I don't know what the final last I checked was.
So it's 19 without the citizens petition. And so the way that I have it set up in here, and I can pull up a sort of summary of everything and how they go together, or how would you like me to do it?
Well, whatever works for you. I mean, we know the first 3, or, I don't know if we want to pull it up in pieces or whatever, but all I really want to do is just walk through the articles that as they currently exist, again, to see if the committee has concerns, questions, inputs that we're going to need before next Tuesday.
Okay, so let me pull up sort of how it all flows together, because I think that'll be the quickest conversation. So this is a summary of proposed appropriations by article. And this has free cash certified. Let me actually just zoom out for 1 second, then I'll zoom back in. So the total water retained earnings, water infrastructure certified, infrastructure fee, and water main fee, this is all certified by DLS, and free cash is certified. The numbers in between are all unaudited figures that we report out when we do the update, so people understand, where the balances start and where they end. So Article 1 through 3 is really based on the free cash being dispersed. The $1.565 million to General Stabilization Fund is based on hitting a target of 13% of omnibus. That falls in line with the policy that currently exists, plus the policy that both the Finance Committee and Select Board have discussed, right? So it's in line with that. The pension stabilization, the $250,000, I feel like we had a conversation on previously, but again, it accomplishes it now and does not prohibit us from further conversation. capital expenditure fund of $1.4 million is essentially balancing the capital budget. We're not losing ground, but we're not looking to necessarily gain ground based on policy, certainly. The capital budget we went through, this is the total summary of what we discussed earlier tonight.
Real quick, that 1.4 though, that's in addition to the money we put in May, right?
Yes, this is the 1.75 that went in May.
Perfect. Thanks.
Article 5, fund transfer to affect tax rate, I would recommend no action on, but it is on there. The community preservation fund, as Jay mentioned earlier, has no activity in it. It's going to be.
Well, I was going to say, do we have confirmation from Frank that there will be nothing? Okay, so that's going to be an indefinite postpone.
Yes, it's going to be indefinitely postponed, and I will use it as an opportunity to show the buckets within CPC because I get that question quite a bit, and so we'll do it as a report. You've had Article 7, 8, and 9 for quite a while now. This is the legal fund, the fire EMS, the Phipps tunnel. Those are all would come directly from free cash. 9 Green Street construction. If you did not see, you now have access to the quote from PAR on that project. And I have continued conversations with the state on accessing a previous bond bill to pay for the cost of that project. But all of the warrant would essentially have all 3 sketches from PAR that are conceptual designs plus an overview for people to begin to look at. And I'll have boards up at town meeting that PAR presented to the select board a couple months ago. Let me zoom back in. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure people understood the water. This only impacts water retained earnings, but there are other components, obviously. All right, so that was 9 Green Street. The water system improvements design engineering. This is, as I said, the $98,000. I would, it could technically be from the infrastructure fee. I would recommend certified retained earnings as the source, leaving still $2 million, which is a very important number for us as a small water system. We do need to have a balance in there to protect the ratepayers if any unforeseen issues arise. But I believe that is a good use. Sidewalk improvements, construction, again, the 230, my recommendation would be from CapEx. And really, when we are appropriating out of free cash, the question always arises, well, free cash or CapEx. The answer of why you do one or the other, quite frankly, is the fact that, if money is not spent in that and it gets turned back, where does the money get turned back to? If you appropriate out of free cash, it goes back to free cash. If you appropriate out of CapEx, it goes back to the balance of CapEx. This is, in my opinion, a capital expenditure. And again, it is leveraging the $400,000 that we will be going through from Complete Streets. Crosswalk safety improvements, again, a lot of backup. This is 3 specific crosswalks that have come up through Safe Routes to Schools, Complete Streets, and also Shared Streets and Spaces, 3 different grants that we've been pounding the pavement on. And these ones are ones that, we think are highlighted and in each of those, including Stantec as well. And then the stormwater management MS4 year 4. I have quite a bit of history in the folder for you to look at before next week. At the end of the day, the answer is if we absolutely were concerned about the bottom line of free cash, we could try to cut this down to as low as $70,000. My recommendation would be to leave it at 90 for a number of reasons. One is we are approaching now the end of MS4. We're doing a lot of field work that is benefiting the town greatly that we do not have the capacity to do internally. And so again, but the quote that leads to 90 and why it could potentially be, sort of whittled to 70 based on the balance of the previous article is all in the folder for you to consider. And then everything else here has no monetary component, although we did discuss, and let me just stop sharing for 1 second. I pull this back up, but I just want to make sure people understand what I put in the folder because of it was a question related to the last discussion. For the road acceptances, people wanted to kind of see the scale and scope of the Highland subdivision. So if you go into this folder, you'll see the mapping. And again, there's a scale on the side. If you're that into it, all that information is now on here. Those things are filed with the clerk's office, which is how the article reads. And then on cannabis zoning, there is nothing in there that you didn't have previously. So let me just, and I see a hand up. So I'll pull up the overview again, but is that the visual that you want up for discussion?
Yep. Okay, Michelle?
I actually had a cannabis question. It was a preemptive hand raise.
You want to buy some or?
That's where I am. I'm on cannabis.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how much money is going to be removed from the general fund.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we discussed this a little bit last night, select board last night in the context of free cash. So in the past 4 years, I'd say about 10% of our free cash generated has been from cannabis revenue. Now the crux of that, or the sort of way that you need to step back and think about that, is that was based on the old HCA model where we had set defined revenue amounts, and those are coming to an end at the end of this fiscal year and the beginning of next fiscal year. And then we're going to be on a variable revenue model based on 3% of wholesale sales. And I just don't have any information to even begin to model what that's going to look like. It's another great reason that we're talking about going to the stabilization fund. We're insulating ourselves. It goes in the fund, then the town can look at the balance and make educated decisions moving forward. That being said, to your direct question, in the free cash that was just certified, of that money, $302,500 was generated by cannabis revenue from the old HCA agreements that are now coming to their 5-year completion. Moving into FY23, as those tailor off, we're looking at about $180,000 guaranteed, and then everything else beyond that is going to be the variable 3% of wholesale sales. And then after FY23, we're now all on variable 3%.
Thank you.
And then I did receive a couple questions on the stabilization fund. I just want to make sure people understand that language, because I don't want it to be too restrictive. This is the broader context of what it can be used on, and we can always make a policy that's more sort of tight than the overall stabilization. One thing I would say is that the tangible assets that can be used, right, if you're thinking about the way that it's written, certainly police cruisers, ambulances are tangible assets that would be, within the realm of what we're talking about. Additionally, the other things that we talk about in terms of programming to impact, drugs in the community, certainly would have a lot of programming that's related to police, schools, youth and family services, ambulance. And so with that, I think we've left ourselves a broad enough range that the town meeting in the future can consider using this money and not have their hands tied.
Thank you, Crawford. You're muted, Dan.
So some of the things that I've asked, so Travis, that was great. I actually really like that Excel file that you put together that with where all the money is going from. That kudos. I know it's not that complicated, but putting it together like that is great, considering all the moving parts. But something I've asked for in the past and never really received is a plan from TAC or from the select board after looking at all the TAC requests. And Tina did send me sort of this whole list of sort of all the stuff that they had, but there's no sort of prioritization, no estimated cost. I really want, before it just sort of feels like we just keep sort of getting these requests here and there. We're not here and there all the time. And I really want to see what the plan is. I mean, what is the sort of the annual spend, going to be on these type of things? A real sort of, concrete plan, and then overlaying that with the sidewalks, with water mains, with just, all of this infrastructure that the select board is working on. I mean, I want to see a holistic plan in place. And it just still sort of frustrates me that we are continuing to ask for money before sort of putting that together, just like the capital plan that you put together, which was, great. This is sort of that infrastructure portion of it, because a lot of comments are being made again about that we're overtaxing people, but yet we want to spend $630,000 a year on sidewalks, and we wanted to continue to spend, a couple $100,000 on crosswalks and signs, and we want to speed up water infrastructure, main replacement by 2 or 3 extra, or 1 or 2 extra miles, a year. We also have the DPW. I mean, there is, so much out there, and we just seem to be doing it kind of, we've requested all of these studies, and what we're haven't really done. And I do understand the water engineering and design. That makes sense, because again, it kind of comes on with well 5, which is something that we think will really sort of help solve a lot of the water problems in town. So to me, that makes sense and it's consistent with what we've been doing. But the other stuff, it just sort of seems like, we're just trying to do stuff because we get these reports, but we haven't actually taken the reports to really digest them. And I do want to commend, Mr. Cronin last night. He did say that they wanted to spend some time doing this, and that it may even take, up to a year to do it, is if I understood him correctly. But then I guess my question is, why are we, why not just do the 400,000 from the complete streets this year, then get that grant in place? Or, why, and then also looking at the crosswalks, where is that sort of that long-term plan of how much we're going to continue to do on these things, and what is the rationale for some of them? And maybe it's in the files, and I'll go back and I'll read it more closely for discussion next week. But that's sort of my overall comments.
Dan, my takeaway was like what I was asking earlier is it looks like this is like ADA compliance is what's on that's why I kind of jumped to it. And
I didn't see the whole list though, but I mean, where are these things being done for ADA compliance? Or, are they being done in only the most trafficked areas? I couldn't find it.
Yeah, take a look at the list. Like it doesn't look like it's on like dead ends, but I was taking a leap of faith based on the survey and, like all the eyes on it. I was like, okay, this is basically ADA compliance. I was more concerned that we're going to put something in and then it's going to get ripped up. And I think everything else you said about seeing a plan, I think it's coming to fruition. I think that.
Well, I've been asking for
that's what I heard from at least John and Ben was that.
I've been asking for the tax stuff for a while. I mean, Charles, let me ask you a question. Could the complete streets 400,000? Could that money be used for the crosswalk $84,000 crosswalk projects?
I'm sorry, what was it?
So the $400,000 you're expecting from complete streets, would that grant be theoretically usable for the crosswalks that they want, the $84,000 projects for those crosswalks?
Theoretically, for those projects, I believe they're on the complete streets list as well. Again, okay. What we were asked to do for the complete streets is create a priority list, right? And so, that was a number of stakeholders in town, and yet, the whole thing that led to what is, unfortunately small print, but very comprehensive information on the complete streets tier 2 prioritization list. And so what we're doing here is, taking that prioritization list, looking at the $400,000, trying to leverage that to get, and ponying up on the town side as well to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck. I understand the idea is, that you're saying, could we just take the 400,000 and do nothing more? And the answer is yes. And we could also not be doing the water project. And the answer is, would we have the impact of if a water main break happened? We don't know that, but I do believe, based on the information from Stantec, it is worthwhile to push ahead with that water project. It's worthwhile to try to leverage the $400,000 to make significant progress here. And then, as you mentioned, and as Ben mentioned off the top, and as Jay reiterated from the conversation last night, that the select board's anticipation is to, now that we have gotten through these reports, begin to look at it and come back and work with the finance committee and others on a holistic plan moving forward. And some of those things, we've heard feedback from the finance committee on the past about, well, if you want to go with borrowings, we have concerns on that because we have the high school. All those things need to be discussed, but that doesn't mean that there aren't projects that are worthwhile right now that don't impact or impede the ability to have those conversations in the future.
No, I understand that, but if the crosswalks could also be paid for by the Complete Streets grant, there is a decision to be made to speed up the sidewalks. And so I guess the other question I have is has the select board looked through the entire list of fixes that were recommended by Stantec that then went into the $630,000 a year number that they say needed to be done to sort of fully update them? And have they accepted that the repairs that were suggested are actually sort of priorities and needed? And what I'm saying is, if I forget how many years is the 630 to go on to get to the sort of, is it 10 years? Is it a 10-year plan?
I think it was 20.
20 years, okay. Okay, so $12 million but so of that $12 million, I mean, are those all really things that need to be done, or were they issues with sidewalks or something that are in not really trafficked areas, right? Kind of dead end streets or things like that, that maybe you cut those down. And so maybe the $12 million really, after you sort of cut a lot of it, maybe it's only 8, and maybe, you know, instead you only need $400,000 a year of sidewalks to sort of stay on that plan for the ones that really are critical to the town.
I think, you know, certainly to the conversation in the future beyond this particular warrant of discussing, you know, what do we need to commit to on the overall plan and what do we not feel is a need is not a conversation that, again, I feel like needs to impact the ability to move ahead on this warrant. And the answer is, look, I don't think that what we necessarily wanted to hear from Stantec was, you know, no, you know, you have quite a bit of sidewalks and you need to be looking at the ADA compliance because it's a significant issue. But that's what they came back with. And, you know, did the select board accept the report to your question? No, because they asked for more information in terms of the planning that we're discussing, and Jay had mentioned, and they wanted that back before they accepted a final report as a deliverable, right? And that's, you know,
but they haven't accepted the final report yet, right? I mean, none of these reports are final yet, right?
That's correct.
But yeah, we're spending money based upon the non-final report.
Right, because the information that they asked for on the sidewalk report is not debating the whether or not these sidewalks are ADA compliant. It's asking for more information and planning beyond the ADA compliance issues, right? That was the feedback to Stantec, and then also asking them to make sure that this was rolled into the water project, which got finalized last night in terms of the presentation. Now, again, the reports, you're right, I mean, could change, and the select board doesn't have to accept everything that Stantec sort of gives. But at the same point, we now have the Complete Streets and Stantec's reports that have quite a bit of overlap in terms of priorities. And why, you know, is there a reason to not move ahead with things that you have two separate groups identifying as your priorities in town? I don't think so.
Well, let me ask you another question. Would these projects be ARPA eligible?
Yes.
Okay. So why, you know, if we're looking to a DPW and we want to make sure that we sort of, you know, are able to sort of fund that, why wouldn't we look to use, you know, ARPA money for these type of things?
Travis, how much ARPA money have we already burned?
I would say specifically a question that has come up from a number of residents on the potential sewer option for downtown could be an excellent use of ARPA funding that would probably exhaust the capital component that we would have available to us. So the answer to the question, what's that?
What do you mean the capital component?
I mean, there is ARPA, unlike CARES, is allowed to be used on capital, right? And so essentially every dollar that's left in ARPA could hypothetically be used specifically on capital. But even that, with a project the size of, you know, one of our larger water main projects or a sewer project for downtown, could exhaust the balance of ARPA. I guess the point is, just like I would say, you know, every time we look at a project, we can't say, well, we can't borrow for it because we have a high school. I would also say every time we look at a project, we can't say we don't want to, you know, fund it through town meeting because we could also do it by ARPA. We can't do all of these by ARPA, and it's certainly a possibility. Yeah,
I agree. But my point is, I guess the 4.4 million could have been spent on capital projects.
Yes, and it's still the balance still can.
Yeah.
But I thought the ARPA. I thought the concern was we were going through the ARPA money too quickly, right? I thought.
Well, I mean, one project basically, you know, they haven't approved much dollar wise except for the tuition free full day kindergarten, right? Like there've been what 100,000.
That's what I'm getting at. I thought that they were already whatever pegged like 2 million, and that's why
1.6 of that was for tuition free full day kindergarten. It was one project. It was one project.
Okay, but either way, Dan, like the bottom line is like I was thinking, like I was like, yeah, well, let's use ARPA for infrastructure, but that's got to last 2 or 3 years. So if you keep going to ARPA,
again, Jay, this goes back to the tuition-free full-day kindergarten issue.
Let's refocus on what we're here for, which is to decide what we need to vote on the warrant articles.
Well, I still would like a plan for TAC, and I've asked for this for over a year.
So let me just understand the TAC question, because if there was a TAC article on here, I'd understand it.
Well, the crosswalks.
You're talking specifically the crosswalks. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, right. Obviously, one of the things that we looked at, and you know, TAC requests are coming through the TAC group and then going through the select board. That's the process on that. And so I understand what I think hypothetically you're asking for is the TAC group to look, long-term, what their needs are and whether or not they need to have a budget or if they should be coming back annually or if, they're essentially set. And at the end of the day, I'll say this, and I'll say this for a number of groups in town, not just TAC, at the same point, we're churning through quite a bit of work, and some of that is resident feedback that the finance committee is not getting, TAC is getting, or the select board's getting, or other committees are getting. And so there is quite a bit of workflow, and I know at least one finance committee member has put in a TAC request and seen that it takes a while to get a response. There is a backlog. So, would they like to have time to be planning and spending their time on that? Yes. At the same point, we have the police chief, the fire chief, the DPW director, a member of the select board, and other residents who have full-time jobs on that committee. And so they have not been able to put that together. When they ask for requests that they're seeing based on the things that are coming through TAC, they vote on them, they go through the select board. I don't know that there's a flaw in that process, but I understand what you're asking for. As it relates to these these crosswalks, again, we've been now involved in multiple processes that have led to grant funding for the town, and there are 3 crosswalks identified here that have been identified through Complete Streets, Safe Routes to Schools, and Shared Streets and Spaces that we believe are worth putting on this warrant. Again, I understand your point, and if I could come up with sort of everything, I think that they have, right? We now have, if you look at the Complete Streets, if you look at the Shared Streets and Spaces discussions, they've identified what they believe are priorities. These 3 are priorities from that perspective. And then that's pretty well vetted. I mean, I can't have a lot more conversations of 3 specific grant programs all overlapping like that. So,
but we're not getting money for these projects from those grant programs.
No, I understand. And we've leveraged money from those grants, and then there's going to be some things that the town has to pony up on, right? I mean, that's the idea, is we need to get every dollar we can out of grants. And when we expend that, and we still need to do things, then it comes down to whether the town prioritizes these to do it themselves or not. And the answer is maybe the town doesn't want to, but these 3 are identified and have been put forward.
All right. Well, we can have some further conversation next week about the.
Okay, Ben, you've been waiting patiently. Ben.
Just a quick point about the 630K about sidewalks. As I understand the number from Stantec, what they were recommending in terms of the spending of the $630,000 is basically to maintain the part of that is to maintain the current level of the inventory, to sort of, as I mean, it's going to deteriorate. There's going to be drainage issues. There's going to be cracks. There's going to be ice. There's all sorts of things that can cause damage. And part of that spending is to maintain the system at the grade. I think it was like, I forget what it was. I think it was 78 or something like that for the entire system. And spending less than that, as they, according to their analysis, would start to deteriorate the system. So like when we talk about a maintenance plan for HVAC, we're talking about this. Basically, the recommendation is a maintenance plan for sidewalks, and that's what the 630 is for. And so we would, obviously target specific projects based on Complete Streets and based on whether or not there's a water main. We don't want to double our efforts and do the same thing twice. That's silly. And to your point about a plan, absolutely, totally agree. We do need a plan. We will have a plan. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be working towards doing the work. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people asking for infrastructure improvements and in the spring, and we want to be able to bid them out so we can do some of those infrastructure improvements. Otherwise, we might have to wait another whole year and lose out on the opportunity to continue to work on the system. So.
Sure, absolutely. But just to point out that the 630 is a enormous number. I mean, for the town and for what we spend on capital. I mean, just for anyone watching or everyone, I mean, this is 630 is 1/3 of our capital set aside each year. And granted, I understand there's free cash and we're putting, but from the capital set aside in the operating budget, 630 is 1/3 of it. And we can't, free cash will not always be $3 million or $2.8 million. So.
Which is why we need a plan. To your point, this is money that would be basically is offset by the free cash. So, to your point, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. And we need to have a long-term plan about how this is budgeted, and we will. We're going to work on it. We're going to build that.
Okay. Mr. Whitaker.
Sorry, go ahead, Travis. You look like you had something important to say.
No, I was just going to say, do you want me to pull back up the sort of holistic view? But no, go ahead, Mark.
No. So I just want to take a second and kind of to echo Dan's ask about the ARPA things. I get where you're coming from, Travis, but I just wanted to kind of I don't know, get an idea that at least some sort of somebody saying, yeah, we thought about that, about the ARPA funding for a lot of these ideas. But sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I was just going to point out, John is, he's a big proponent of us looking towards potential federal infrastructure money in general. I would, personally, there's like an infrastructure bill, I believe Thursday. I mean, I don't know, it changes every week when the House of Representatives of Washington could vote on it. But, that could potentially be an opportunity for some things. And, the idea is to try to get some projects together so we can apply for as many things as possible. I would rather see, personally, this is not the opinion of the select board, I would rather see us wait on using ARPA funds towards those kinds of things and try to look towards that infrastructure money, because that would be more in the wheelhouse. It would be much more applicable. So to your point, I think we are looking towards those things, but we're looking towards whether or not that, that infrastructure is coming through. And then, what the budget looks like from the federal government. There might be federal funds coming in substantial form to the state of Massachusetts that we would be looking for towards these kinds of projects.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second question is, and this is just maybe my mind has just gone blank on this, but the proposals for 9 Green Street looks like it's all going to be a parking lot. When and how was that decided that that was going to be a parking lot? And I don't remember that happening or when it happened. So just again, it could just be my mind. Sorry about that.
No, I think, and that's one of the reasons I really want this in front of town meeting. The conversations that have happened, and I recognize as a resident. And this is something I think the town needs to be doing better. And I'm very much looking forward to having an ATA HR director to help me with these specific things, right? We have great staff in terms of, what we do on Facebook and those things. We need to be amplifying these conversations so that, we're getting to people and not requiring them to be involved. So essentially what happened was a 9 Green Street committee sat down, looked at a number of things. They had some engineering component to that group because there were some questions and DEP involvement in what's under the ground of that site. Looked at a number of things, and at the end of the day, after their meetings and some of the technical expertise that they had, their recommendation was, because of this, they did not believe that there would be a reuse of that as a building, that, clearly you're not digging out a basement in there. You need to be capping it, and therefore you're limiting that potential. To flip it back to the private market was something that had been discussed and was what we generally do when we have a taking, those types of things. Anyway, the 9 Green Street committee went through all that process, has since been disbanded, but their recommendation was to make it into a parking lot. And for a variety of reasons. One, the stormwater component in that area is very tricky. You've been behind the superette, you understand. I mean, that's the adjoining property. And so what essentially happened was we took the property and we had a conversation previously in a previous finance committee meeting, I think potentially before you were on, but I'm not sure, about, how we would normally auction off the property and those things. So the recommendation has been, and so now we've been through 2 town meetings. One was to get the design engineering and permitting done by a group. We ended up with that funding through the December 2020 town meeting. We signed on PAR to do that work. They've completed step 1 and 2 of that process, which is the demo plan of the building. We've had issues with the building. I've had an insurance claim on it. We have a separate insurance policy. I've had an insurance claim on it with a brick falling off, hitting a car, those types of things. And then we've had kids climbing on it. It's time for the building to come down. And so we have at the May 2021 annual town meeting authorized the demolition costs, which were put together by PAR. Then the next 2 stages after the demo plan from PAR was then the stormwater site plan and the general site plan for 9 Green Street. Both of those essentially are wrapped up in this rendering, which now I'd like, town meeting to essentially look at and give a blessing to of that. I still intend, and my expectation personally is that we'll be funding this project through state funding. And certainly some of the components that you see within the 300,000, even if we were to have to cover a portion of it, certainly would be potential grant opportunities, including the EV charging stations. But essentially at the end of the day, the reason for the parking lot is it supports it supports the businesses in that area. It supports our assets as well in terms of Goodwill Park and ancillary parking across the street for pedestrian access to the library. And, you know, it does give us the opportunity in that area potentially to have a better traffic pattern in terms of, you know, and this is not, the project is not related and reliant on this, but if there was a one-way in at the Superette that then loops out and uses 9 Green Street as an access point, you have less people taking their lives in their hands when they take a left out of there. You know, you have truck access that has a point, right? We maintain it and those types of things. So holistically for that downtown area, there's a lot of benefits that I see. And the reason it came about really, you know, some of it is related to the environmental components that were from before we took it. But that was the conversation that led to us today.
Awesome. Yeah, as soon as you started saying 9 Green Street Committee, I said, oh yeah, I remember all this now. So thank you. Sorry about that.
No, but I think that again, you know, as a resident, right, you know, that's another thing that from when that group met to where we are now with a rendering from PAR, and PAR presented this to the select board about a month and a half ago. You know, all of this information should have been delivered and pushed to residents so that they don't have to go find it. So I think that that's something we can be doing better, and I intend to.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions on the material, the list of articles that Travis sent? Anybody need supplemental information before next week that's not already there? Obviously, just like I said with the capital part, if there are things that you think of after this meeting, you can certainly let me know or go directly to Travis if you think that he'll have it. I do want to point out that in spite of all the supply chain disruptions, the one thing that has not been disrupted is the supply chain of truck exclusion signs. Because my recommendation would be the select board to buy 3 signs that say trucks allowed, and then just have a sign that says trucks not allowed anywhere else, because I saw 3 more signs go up this week to say truck exclusion, and it is now blighting every street I walk on to see a truck exclusion, and you know, things like that. So anyway,
I think Travis's contract actually has you know, a clause in there where he gets extra something you know
performance review based on number of truck exclusion signs that go up. Mine, I feel fortunate because the one that's right near my house now is a truck exclusion sign with an arrow. So I got 2 signs to go with the 3 signs I got 3 months ago. So 5 new signs within about, you know, 200 yards of my house. That's you know, just what I was
talk about 5G. I mean, you know, if the vaccine gives you 5G,
I know that I'm going to have my own Faraday cage worth of signs at the rate this is going. So anyway, so anybody have any other comments about the warrant? And again, as I said, I'm mostly interested in anybody who wants to see anybody have any, you know, again, if you don't think of it now, make sure you let me know as soon as possible so that we're in a position to vote next week. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so that's good. Okay, so that, I believe, let me check. I think that was the last thing on our agenda for today. Oh, liaison updates, which I had none known at this time. I will give a quick update unless you want. Well, you weren't there, Michelle, but if you go ahead, Michelle.
Did we talk about streetlights, Travis?
Do you want to wait on that, or do you want to talk about that now?
Well, is there anything to really discuss?
No, so I mean, one of the things, you know, I need to have a conversation with Eversource. They've presented us with the option of purchasing the streetlights for $1, and what that comes with is then the requirement that we maintain them. There's been some changes in the sort of the economic outlook of our billing that may dictate that it now makes sense for us to simply have a contract for somebody to maintain the lights. That may be better for us financially than to maintain Eversource owning them. But those conversations are still ongoing.
Okay. So, okay, what I was going to say was there was a budget subcommittee meeting of the school committee last week. There's nothing spectacular to report out of that in the sense that, you know, they have lots of things, as everybody knows, there are lots of things on their plate. Really, the focus of the meeting in terms of public discourse was the $500,000 for the HVAC system and dealing with that kind of thing. So, other than that, I don't know if, you know, I think that pretty much sums up the public part of it, right, Ben? Yeah. So, okay. Any other liaison updates anybody wants to give? Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the agenda. So if anybody has anything to bring up, go ahead, Mr. Sparrow.
Yes, I just wanted to bring up that John and I are going to be taking down Vin and Mark tomorrow night at trivia. So be there, or be square.
Keep hoping.
And
Yeah, I heard John yesterday quote Donald Trump that if you guys lose, it didn't happen, and there was cheating, and if you win, it was the greatest victory comeback ever. So.
Well, I hear that Cyber Ninjas is available to audit the results and if necessary. So.
And I hear Sidney Powell has some free time.
Yeah, that's right. Let's not go there. Okay.
But it's the same thing.
No, I know, but no. Well, the Cyber Ninjas was they did an audit, so I was not speaking. I was speaking the truth, right? They were hired to do an audit.
It may not be a fair.
I will incentivize. What'd you say, Jay?
It may not be a fair bet trying to like change the conversation because there's 7 of us and 3 of them. But I don't know if there's an ethics violation, but I'm willing to put up like money, beer money or food money to bet that our team wins.
Who's representing us?
Myself and Mark.
And Mark.
Oh yeah, you guys got them. This is come on, this is
You don't even have to put up money, because all we have to do is say that if they lose, they have to share the clerk roll. Right?
If Ben just has to read the statement at the beginning of it, I think they'll all just go to sleep by the end of it, and you guys can just run.
Okay.
I'm saying when I'm willing to back up my team going into that contest.
Thanks, Jay.
If anyone wants to take that bet,
I agree.
Select board side.
I fully agree, as that they are more than capable of representing us in the.
I'll say if you win, we'll go to Casey's and I'll buy a round. How's that?
I was thinking more like we take down all the signs.
Yeah, that's right. We'll bet signs. We'll let trucks drive everywhere. Okay. Anyway.
All right, Casey's. All right, we can do something. Casey's outside.
I'll make a motion to close the meeting. And the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Would that be a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Yes. Is that
Tough crowd, Vin. They're trying to pump you up and then they just kick you in the
I
kneecaps.
know.
I'll second Vin's motion to end the meeting or adjourn.
Okay, that is not subject to debate. So for me, proceed immediately to a roll call vote. Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, September 28th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you heard before, we will be meeting next week to make our, hopefully, votes on all our recommendations for the October town meeting. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.